cheap paper. The trembling handwriting of an 11-year-old girl, the smell of dampness and hope. She licked the envelope and sent it to the most powerful wizard in Britain. We are used to thinking that Petunia Dursley hated magic because she feared it. That is a lie. She didn't hate magic because it was something alien. She hated it because once she begged to be taken into that world. And she was refused. But we'll get to that in a moment. First, look at this house. Privet Drive, number 4. The most boring place on planet Earth. A perfectly manicured lawn, a car washed to a shine, curtains that are never dirty. From the outside, it looks like middle-class heaven, but inside, it is a bunker. In this house, they didn't fear monsters under the bed. They feared the mail. They feared strange owls. They feared the word that starts with M. The entire life of Vernon and Petunia Dursley is not just malice. It is a total, panicked defense operation. And here is the question: who were they defending themselves against? It's easy to label them villains, caricatures, the fat uncle, the skinny aunt, the spoiled cousin. But if we remove the Harry Potter perception filter and look at the facts, the picture becomes terrifying. These two built their reality on one reinforced concrete rule: normality above all else. For Vernon Dursley, normality was a religion. He sold drills. He loved order. Any deviation from the norm caused him physical pain. Imagine living in a world where the laws of physics could be cancelled at any second just because your nephew sneezed. You would go mad too. But Petunia had a different reason. She knew everything from the very beginning. While Vernon thought the Potters were just strange, unemployed people, Petunia carried a secret that had been corroding her from the inside for 20 years. Imagine that level of tension every day, waiting for your world to explode. And the wildest thing about their relationship is the level of denial. Did you know that until their wedding, Vernon didn't even really understand who his wife's sister was? He didn't know her world. He just felt that there was something wrong there. They created their little sterile cocoon. They cemented the windows. They scrubbed any imagination out of the house with bleach. But to understand how this couple turned into jailers for their own nephew, we need to rewind the tape. Far back, long before Privet Drive, long before Harry. We need to go to a place where the air smells of coal and rust, to a place where two sisters swung on a swing set, and one of them suddenly flew, while the other stayed on the ground forever. Cokeworth, the mid-60s. Forget about green lawns. This is a town of factory chimneys, soot, and identical brick boxes. Standing out is not the custom here. Here, greyness is the colour of safety. This is where the Evans sisters grew up, Petunia and Lily. At first, they were inseparable, typical sisters, secrets, whispers under the blanket, shared games. Petunia was the older one. She was supposed to lead, to protect, to be in charge. That was her role. But then the rules of the game changed. Imagine a playground. Rusty, creaking swings. Lily swings higher and higher. At the highest point, she lets go. Any normal child would fall and scrape their knees. Lily doesn't. She floats gently to the ground, as if gravity decided to make an exception for her. Petunia watches this, and there is no joy in her eyes. There is fear. And something else, something darker. She screams, "I'm telling Mummy!" Pay attention to this phrase. It's not a cry for help. It's an attempt to regain control. Mummy is the law. Mummy must forbid Lily from flying because flying is against the rules. But there was a third person on this playground, a boy from Spinner's End, Severus Snape. Dirty clothes, long hair, a strange gaze. For a neat freak like Petunia, he was the embodiment of everything repulsive, the social bottom. But he was the one who explained to Lily who she was. You are a witch. For Lily, this was the discovery of a whole new world. For Petunia, a sentence. Look what happens. An outsider appears, this strange boy, and he takes her sister into a secret club where Petunia is denied entry. They whisper. They show each other tricks. A flower opens its petals in Lily's palm. And Petunia? She stands on the sidelines. In that moment, that specific hatred is born. Not for magic, per se, but for the fact that magic rejected her. And then a key moment happens, a scene often overlooked, but it explains everything. Petunia laughs at Snape's clothes. She tries to humiliate him to elevate herself. Ordinary childhood cruelty. But Snape is not an ordinary child. A tree branch above Petunia's head cracks and falls right on her. Impact, pain, tears. Does Lily run to her sister? No, she stays with Severus. She asks him, "Did you make that happen?" But there is curiosity in her voice, not condemnation. Petunia runs home alone, physically wounded by magic and emotionally betrayed by her sister. That is when she says that word for the first time. "Freak!" She shouted it at Lily. Not witch, not sorceress. Freak. Remember that word. Years later, Harry Potter will hear it directed at him every day, but he won't know that it is the echo of that very resentment on a playground in Cokeworth. Petunia tried to convince herself that she was better, that she was normal, and they were defective, but deep inside, under layers of snobbery, lived a little girl who just wanted the flower to open on her palm too, but the flower remained closed. And then the letter came. An envelope of yellowish parchment that drew a thick line between the sisters. And Petunia decided on a desperate step. Lily's 11th birthday. A celebration in the Evans house. The parents are beaming with pride. They have a witch in the family. It's a miracle. It's a gift. And Petunia? Petunia is now just Petunia. Ordinary, plain. A background decoration for her sister's success. And here happens what the canon hid until the very last books. The thing that overturns our idea of Harry Potter's evil aunt. She sits at the table, takes a sheet of paper, and writes a letter. To whom? To the headmaster of Hogwarts. Just think about the level of that desperation. The girl who yelled "freak" and pretended to despise this world humbles herself and begs to be taken there. She didn't hate Hogwarts. She dreamed of it. She sent the letter. And she waited. The answer came quickly. Gold ink, heavy parchment, signature, Albus Dumbledore. And here is the paradox. Dumbledore wrote her a very kind, very polite letter. He explained why it was impossible, with respect, with warmth. And that was worse than a slap in the face. If he had been rude to her, she could have gotten angry. But his kindness confirmed a terrible fact. Magic is real. The world of miracles exists, but there is no place for her there. Not because she is bad, but because she is not special enough. It was a death sentence for her self-esteem. She hid the rejection. Did she tear it up? No, she kept it as proof of her defectiveness. But secrets in Cokeworth don't live long. Lily and Severus found that letter, or rather, Snape found it. Imagine this scene on platform 934. Lily is leaving for a new life. Petunia stands there, feeling like a spare part. And suddenly Snape, that boy from the slums, looks at her and whispers, "We saw your letter." In that moment, Petunia's world collapsed. Lily knew too. Her perfect sister, her Lily, read her humiliating plea and discussed it with her weird friend. Lily tried to justify herself, to say something comforting, but it was too late. Snape finished her off with one word. Squib. He didn't even know what it meant, but he knew it was hurtful. Petunia looked at them, at that train, at that smoke, and a defense mechanism triggered in her head. Click. If I cannot be part of this world, then this world is evil. If I am ordinary, then being ordinary is the only correct path. She declared war on everything abnormal. She needed to burn this dream out of herself. She needed to become maximally grounded, maximally boring, maximally predictable. She needed a shield, a man of concrete, a man with not a drop of magic in him. And fate threw her the ideal candidate. His name was Vernon. And so he enters the stage, Vernon Dursley. If you watch the movies, you see him as a caricature, an angry, fat uncle who yells for no reason. But let's look at him through the eyes of the traumatized Petunia Evans. She was looking for the exact opposite of Lily. Lily was chaos, flight, magic. Vernon was gravity. Vernon worked as a junior executive at a firm called Grunnings. The firm made drills. Think about that symbolism. Drills. A tool designed to make holes in hard surfaces. A crude, loud, absolutely material object. No magic wands. Only hardened steel and torque. Their dates were a distinct art form. Vernon spent hours telling her about alloys, about concrete, about the prospects of the building materials market. Any other girl would have died of boredom by minute 5. Petunia listened, holding her breath. For you and me, his monologues are torture. For her, it was therapy. Every word about drills, about gas prices, about the weather convinced her, it is safe here, there is no magic here. For Petunia, boredom became the strongest drug. She got hooked on Vernon's normality. And Vernon wasn't just boring, he was aggressively normal. He tolerated nothing that stood out. Long hair on men, outrageous, bright clothes, clownish, strange names, unacceptable. He was the watchdog of reality. And Petunia realized with him she was behind a stone wall. The climax of their romance happened in his car. Vernon proposed, very practically, without unnecessary sentiment, and Petunia said yes. But there remained one problem. Lily. Petunia couldn't get married without telling the truth about her sister. Imagine the fear. She was afraid that Vernon, this knight of normality, would reject her once he found out that her genes carried this infection. During a snack in the car, somewhere in a parking lot by a diner, she confessed, with a breaking voice. My sister, she goes to a school for wizards. She waited for shouting. She waited for him to start the engine and drive away. But Vernon did the thing that finally conquered her heart. He shrugged and said he didn't blame her for having a freak in the family. Do you understand? He wasn't surprised by magic. He treated it like a shameful disease, like ringworm or bad heredity, for which Petunia herself was not responsible. We just won't talk about it, he decided. It was a moment of triumph. Petunia received absolution. She officially became normal, and her past was cut off and sealed. It seemed like a happy ending. A house, a car, drills. But etiquette required a meeting with the bride's family. They had to meet, James Potter and Lily Evans versus Vernon Dursley and Petunia. They agreed to have dinner at a restaurant, and that dinner became a catastrophe that would echo back to hit Harry Potter 14 years later, 1977, the restaurant. This was supposed to be an evening of reconciliation, a moment when two halves of the Evans family could find common ground. But instead, a disaster occurred. We often forget that James Potter in his youth was not a saint. He was rich, talented, confident, and a bit arrogant. And Vernon Dursley was a man who measured a person's value by the size of their wallet and the make of their car. They sat at the table. And the air immediately became electric. Vernon wanted to show who was boss. He was older. He worked at a serious firm. He started the conversation with what he understood, money and cars. Vernon asked James what car he drove. Imagine the situation. Vernon expects an answer like Ford or Vauxhall. He is ready to compare horsepower and condescendingly pat the lad on the shoulder. But James lives in a different world. He smiled and began describing the specs of his racing broom. Here is where everything breaks. James wasn't trying to joke. For him, this is reality, but Vernon took it as a spit in the face. He decided this shaggy-haired guy was mocking him. "A broom? Do you take me for an idiot?" Vernon turned purple. He decided to attack from another angle. If the guy has no car, he must be poor. He suggested aloud that wizards must live on unemployment benefits. That was a low blow. Vernon was trying to humiliate James in front of the women. To show Petunia, look, your choice is a loser. But James missed the hint again. He started talking about Gringotts, about the mountains of gold his parents left him, about how gold galleons are hard currency. For Vernon, this was the last straw. He didn't believe a single word. He decided James was just a loudmouth, an amateur conjurer without a penny to his name, blowing smoke in everyone's faces. Vernon stood up and walked out of the restaurant. Petunia ran after him. Lily remained at the table in tears. James sat confused, not understanding what he had done wrong. This evening determined Harry Potter's fate. Think about it. When Vernon Dursley sees little Harry on his doorstep 4 years later, he won't see a child. He will see a mini-copy of that same arrogant James who, as Vernon thought, laughed at him in the restaurant. Vernon hated Harry not just for the magic. He hated him for that humiliating dinner, for that feeling of inferiority next to the golden boy Potter. And what about Petunia? That evening, she made a choice. She saw how happy Lily was with James, despite the scandal. She saw that lightness, and she hated them even more. She chose Vernon's side. She calmed him down. She said James was just abnormal and not worth paying attention to. They drove away into their grey, understandable life. The bridge was burned, but there was still one formal reason to meet: the wedding. The day Petunia Evans finally transformed into Mrs. Dursley, and the day she dealt her sister the final blow, Vernon and Petunia's wedding, the day that was supposed to be a triumph of normality. Petunia planned every second, napkins matching the tablecloth, the right music, the right guests, people from Grunnings, neighbours, useful acquaintances, but in the corner of the hall there was a problem. A delegation of wizards, Vernon Dursley, held the defence line. After the disaster at the restaurant, he made a decision. He would no longer try to understand James. He would ignore him. All evening, Vernon pointedly did not speak to his wife's sister's fiancé. If anyone asked who that guy with glasses was, Vernon hissed through his teeth, "Some conjurer." Not a wizard, a conjurer. Do you feel the difference? A wizard is something powerful. A conjurer is a clown pulling rabbits out of a hat at children's parties. Vernon reduced James's magic to cheap trickery. It was his way of coping. And what was happening between the sisters? Here, the drama was even deeper. Lily Evans was not a bridesmaid, her own sister. Why? Petunia told everyone that Lily was too busy with school. A lie. The truth was that Petunia was terrified of one thing, that Lily would outshine her, that she would do something magical, or simply be too beautiful, too bright. This was Petunia's day, and she was not going to share the spotlight with a witch. Lily understood everything, and yet she came, and she brought a gift, a vase. It would seem just a piece of decor, but it was a magical vase. It changed colour. Petals on it bloomed and withered. It was a work of art. Petunia accepted the gift. She smiled. She said, "Thank you." But we know what happened to that vase later. It didn't stand on the mantelpiece. It didn't decorate the table. Most likely, it went into the darkest corner of the cupboard or the attic. In that moment, Petunia looked at the gift and saw not beauty. She saw a threat. That vase was a Trojan horse, a piece of magic trying to penetrate her sterile home. There is a theory that Petunia wanted to smash it right there at the wedding, but normal people Don't smash gifts in front of guests. That was the last time the sisters saw each other in a normal setting. The wedding ended, the guests left. Vernon took Petunia to number 4 Privet Drive. They slammed the door, they hung new curtains, they bought new furniture, and the Cold War began. Only instead of rockets and threats, the main weapon in this war was a total, deafening silence. 3 years, from 1978 to 1981, the Dursleys built their perfect fortress. They had a son, Dudley, the center of their universe, a boy they buried in toys, food, and attention. Why? Out of love? Certainly, but there was a second reason. Dudley was their proof. He was a living shield of normality. The louder he screamed, the more sweets he demanded, the calmer Vernon felt. These are ordinary problems, understandable problems, and somewhere out there, beyond the invisible line, the Potters had Harry. How did the Dursleys find out? A postcard arrived, a short message that Lily had a son. Petunia took it in her hands, looked at her sister's handwriting, and threw it in the trash bin. Think about it. She didn't just ignore the news. She physically disposed of it like a contaminated object. That day, Vernon and Petunia made an unspoken pact. The Potters do not exist. They have no nephew, but the fear didn't go anywhere. In 10 minutes, I will show you one detail in their will that explains why Harry survived in this house at all. But to understand it, you need to see exactly what Petunia was afraid of in those years. She knew a war was going on. The wizarding world was burning. Voldemort was killing people in droves. Did Lily write to her about it? Unlikely. But Petunia felt it. Rumours, strange deaths in the news, unexplained disasters. She understood what is killing them could come for her too. That was when the censorship dictionary appeared in number 4. Vernon forbade words starting with M. Magic, mystery, mysticism. Any mention of strangeness was punished instantly. If neighbours asked about Petunia's sister, the answer was prepared in advance. She and her husband live their own lives. We don't keep in touch. It wasn't just a lie, it was a spell. Vernon believed if you don't call evil by its name, it won't be able to enter the door. Outside, silence. Inside, panic. They stopped going to London to avoid accidentally meeting someone in robes. They checked the mail with the caution of a sapper defusing a bomb. They thought if they were quiet enough, the storm would pass them by. But the storm did not pass. Autumn, 1981, October. The days were getting shorter. Clouds were gathering. And while Vernon sold drills and Petunia fed Dudley porridge, the clock was ticking. They had only a few days of normal life left. Fate had already raised the hammer, and the blow was meant to fall not on them, but on those they were so diligently erasing from memory. Tuesday came, November 1st. The day the Dursleys' reality cracked at the seams. Tuesday, November 1st, the most important day in the history of magical Britain. And the weirdest day in the life of Vernon Dursley. He woke up, brushed his teeth, put on the most boring tie he could find. Everything was going according to plan, but reality had already started to glitch. The first alarm bell rang when he pulled out of the driveway. A cat, a tabby cat, was sitting on the garden wall and reading a map. Vernon didn't immediately grasp what he saw. His brain, tuned to normality, refused to process the signal. Cats don't read maps. It's nonsense, a trick of the light. He shook his head and drove on, but the worm of doubt had already settled in his mind. Then more. While sitting in traffic, he noticed people, lots of people. They didn't look like office clerks. They were wearing cloaks, emerald, purple, red. Vernon tried to explain it rationally. Young people, some idiotic fashion, or maybe they are collecting money for something. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. It annoyed him. Why were they so happy? Why were they whispering? And then he heard it. He was passing a group of these weirdos near the bakery, just a couple of phrases snatched from the air. "The Potters, that's right, that's what I heard. And their son Harry." Vernon froze. The blood drained from his face. His world wobbled. Potter? Harry? He flew into his office, grabbed the phone. He wanted to call home, to ask Petunia, but ask what? "Honey, you haven't heard. Has your sister died by any chance?" He put the receiver down. No, he couldn't. All day, Vernon Dursley fought panic. He yelled at subordinates. He tried to focus on drills. He convinced himself that Potter is a common surname, that Harry is a common name. It was desperate mental gymnastics. Evening, he returned home. And the madness continued right in the living room. The news anchor spoke of shooting stars, of owls flying by day. People were calling the studio, reporting strangeness all over the country. Vernon sat in his armchair. Petunia poured tea. He had to ask. He could no longer keep it inside. Cautiously, like a sapper, he started the conversation. Mentioned her sister, mentioned strange things on the news. Look at Petunia's reaction. She tensed. Her lips pursed into a thin line. She answered sharply, defensively. "Their son is called Harry. Nasty. Common name, if you ask me." Vernon exhaled. "Yes, I agree." They didn't say the main thing. They didn't say the word magic. They simply confirmed their pact. We are normal. They are not. And this does not concern us. That night, they went to bed with a heavy feeling. Vernon reassured himself that even if the Potters were involved in something, it was happening far away. It couldn't touch them here, in Little Whinging. How wrong he was. While Vernon drifted off to sleep, outside, right by their house, a man appeared who looked like a silver lighter. He clicked his fingers, and the street lamps on Privet Drive went out one by one. Darkness covered number 4. The climax was arriving. A cold, grey morning, November the 2nd. Petunia Dursley opens the door to put out the milk bottles. Ordinary routine, the ritual of normality, but there is no milk on the doorstep. There is a basket, and inside a bundle of blankets. In that moment, before she even saw the child's face, before she saw the scar, Petunia understood everything. Her sister is dead. The war they so diligently ignored had come right to their door and left an orphan on the mat. A scream. She screamed. Vernon ran into the hallway, but the scariest thing wasn't in the basket. The scariest thing lay on top. An envelope, parchment, familiar handwriting. Remember where we started? With a letter from an 11-year-old girl begging to be taken to Hogwarts. Back then, Albus Dumbledore told her no. 20 years later, he sent her a second letter. And this time he wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. I promise to explain the detail that flips the meaning of their cruelty. Why did they keep Harry? Why didn't these people who hate magic dump him at an orphanage that same day? The answer was in that letter. Dumbledore didn't just ask them to look after a nephew. He activated an ancient magic, the bond of blood. As long as Harry calls the place where his mother's blood dwells his home, Voldemort cannot touch him. Petunia read it, and she understood the terms of the deal. It was blackmail. The most noble blackmail in history. Dumbledore literally told her, if you throw him out, the protection falls, and then they will come for him, and then for you. She looked at Vernon, looked at sleeping Dudley. She had no choice. She picked up the basket. She carried Harry into the house, and the second she crossed the threshold, the contract was sealed. She became a jailer against her will. That is why she hated his eyes so much. Harry had Lily's eyes. Every time she looked at him, Petunia saw the sister she lost and the world that broke her life. Harry was a living reminder of her own defectiveness and the mortal danger hanging over their heads. What did they do? They tried to cure him. The cupboard under the stairs. It's not just cruelty. It's an attempt to lock magic in the smallest, darkest space possible, to compress it, to crush it with normality. They thought if they starved him, if they dressed him in rags, if they beat into him that he was nobody, the magic would disappear. They were wrong. Vernon and Petunia Dursley wanted to live a boring life. They dreamed of being the most ordinary people on earth, but fate played a cruel joke on them. They were cast as the guardians of the most important wizard of the century, and they failed that role terribly. The door of number 4 slammed shut. The locks clicked. The curtains were drawn. The boy who lived, but his childhood died on that doorstep. Ahead were 10 years of silence, dust, and spiders. 10 years before the next letter would arrive. But that is a completely different story. Good night.